handy brands to cars, software to snack foods, and everything in between, some star-studded spots shone in the most expensive and most viewed time slot on television. While some came away celebrated, several others felt forgettable and bland. Which commercials were your winners and losers in this year's advertising Super Bowl? Marketing and sales are full of myths, misconceptions, and unbelievably expensive TV spots. Join us as we leave the echo chamber and weigh in with our take from the 2025 Super Bowl.
Hello and welcome to the Rethink Marketing Podcast, where today we're setting the stage for the spectacle of Super Bowl 59. I'm Paul Frodge, joined by Mr. Marketing, and for today's conversation, the strategic storyteller with a savvy spin on Super Bowl showdowns, Colin Jeffries. Colin, how are you doing today?
Oh, Paul, I'm feeling great. How about you?
I'm doing good. It's interesting. You talk about Super Bowls and TV spots being expensive. I feel like that's all relative, and looking forward to today's conversation about was it worth it or not?
Absolutely. I think when you break it down from a CPM perspective, it's interesting to actually consider how expensive it really is. But when I think about the growth in viewers over the last, say, 10 years and the matching inflation on the cost for a spot, it doesn't really seem like they're correlated.
I agree. It's interesting though when you look at it and how expensive it truly is. It's not just the $8 million that the 30-second spot ended up being by the end of it with the supply and demand, but it's all of the other costs that go into it between agency fees, production fees, a lot of talent, with endorsements that were thrown in there as well. The research is showing that the Super Bowl ads for this year could cost us upwards of $40 million. So, taking into consideration not just that total dollar amount, but also Fox and name the year, if it's CBS or if it's, any of the other stations that are broadcasting the Super Bowl, each year it's more than that as well, where the additional ad spend is asked for as well throughout the year on the network. So it can get costly for sure.
Excellent points, Paul. And then I'll also layer on the cost of social media spend, because think about how many brands are putting out a 30-second version, but that's a bit of a teaser for their 90-second version, and they're paying to promote it on social media and other platforms. But to get into the raw cost of a spot, anyone can look at this as far as viewership goes. 2015 was a recent peak in viewership, 114 million people watching the Super Bowl. That actually dropped down to sub 100 million in 2019 and 2021, but has been climbing back up, surpassing 100 million in 2022, 115 million in 2023, 123 million in 2024, 127 million in 2025. Now, I know this is an audio podcast, and I don't think we have these numbers on the screen, but basically, we've grown about 20% from the low of 2021, around 96 million people, up to 128 million people roughly in 2025. Now, when we look at spots, a spot in 2021 was 5.5 million. That jumped by a whopping 1.5 million to 6.5 million in 2022. It's held a little bit steady, 7.5 million from 2023 to 2024. And in 2025, I've read reports, and I'm sure you have too, Paul, of some brands paying $8 million for 30 seconds, with the average spend being about 7 million. So I just don't know. Again, we can argue the cost per thousand impressions and those sorts of things, but man, to see viewership tick up a little bit and the cost for a spot go from basically 4 million, 4.5 million in 2015, 2016, up to 7 to 8 million in 2025, that's a tall order. It's become extremely exclusive. Not that it wasn't already.
I would agree with that. And, back in my TV days, I remember, national spots during the Super Bowl going for 2 to 3 million. So it's gone up quite a bit since then. But you think about how fragmented and splintered media is anymore. And there's very few programs where you can advertise and get to an audience of this caliber. So is it worth it? I do believe it is for some brands, especially the brands that are really putting an effort into it and making it an overall campaign that's not just for the Super Bowl. Colin, you mentioned social media. I was going through this in preparation of the podcast, and looking at, like you said, 90-second spots. There's the minute spots, the 60 seconds. That seems like it's very popular as well, and then getting it down to a 30 or a 15 as well. So, the brands that are making this an ongoing push into 2025, I do believe it could be worth it if you've got the right creative. There's some of these ads, and to each his own, but we'll get into it in just a few minutes. But some of these are just duds, when it comes to the actual creative and either the humor or, missing the mark, when it comes to potentially the emotion aspect of it. So, but there are some winners here, in my opinion, and I'd love to get into that.
Absolutely. Well, I guess we'll start with the winners, Paul. What were some of your favorites?
Yeah, so one of the things I looked at, everybody's got their own rankings, but USA Today, ranked the top 10, and I'll go through this for just a minute here. So Budweiser, the first delivery with the foal that was chasing the keg down the street in the river and over the waterfall. I do believe that I would put that at one of the top of my list as well. The
Can
let,
can I
yeah.
jump in really quick, Paul? Because
Oh,
I
absolutely.
actually I agree with you completely on that. Coors Light, Mick Ultra, Stella, lots of beer brands ran spots, and some were good, some were forgettable. But the interesting thing is, I think any one of those spots, for the most part, you could have replaced the Stella with any beer. You could have replaced the Coors Light with any other beer, and the spot would have still held. And the interesting thing with Budweiser is they've done a great job of branding the brand. And they're not talking about the beer. It's a memorable commercial. It strikes the emotions. Like we're talking about it now. So I think it's a winner. And I can tell you exactly what beer brand that was for. The commercial with Matt Damon and David Beckham, I watched it, and the only reason I know that it's for Stella is because I've seen it 3 or 4 times, right? I saw it on social media, I saw it during the game, I saw it on social media afterward. So it's just funny to me where Budweiser, I think, did a great job, and they have a history of doing this. It wasn't like they ran one commercial in one Super Bowl. They've run commercials for decades, but I think they did a great job just in being kind of irreplaceable with that product, given the niche of their market.
Totally agree. Yeah, I totally agree with those Clydesdales. It definitely is memorable. Each commercial that they make, I believe I read that it was the eighth time that they were number one as far as the number one commercial for the Super Bowl. So kudos to Budweiser for sure on that. You mentioned the Coors Light and you mentioned Stella, Mick Ultra. Mick Ultra ended up in the USA as number three with the Ultra Hustle with the pickleball. I did think that that was memorable, but I did like the Coors Light Slow Mondays, with the sloths that were at their desk and doing everything very very slow because it was portraying the Monday after the Super Bowl as well. So I thought that was a good spot as well. What do you think?
Yeah, Paul, I agree. I thought Willem Dafoe and Catherine O'Hara did a great job. I mean, Willem Dafoe, classic, like The Green Goblin. He was in so many different movies, very, very well known. I think just very representative of the quote unquote pickleball generation, if you will. I thought that was a great spot. It landed well. My only contention there is I it could have been Coors Light, it could have been Bud Light, it could have been Mick Ultra, it could have been any beer. They were just doing the hustle, so to speak, to win a beer, and I didn't feel like it was really well branded, if that makes sense. Now they showed the product many times, and it was a funny, punchy, memorable, shareable commercial. So I think they checked a lot of the boxes. And again, not everybody can be Bud Light, where they've spent decades building a brand. Is that something that they can come back and Mick Ultra can build on it again in the future? Probably not. Seems to me like a one and done. So I think my main takeaway from that spot was it was well done. It had its place, but I don't see it having a long shelf life.
I do think that Mick Ultra over the years has done a good job putting together sports and a drinkable beer, though. So I do think that lends itself to that being something more than maybe a hearty beer or another brand that hasn't really put themselves in that position. So that would be my take on that one.
That's a great point. I think last year, the 2024 Super Bowl was when they did the spot with Lionel Messi and he was playing soccer on the beach. I think that was Mick Ultra. Again, I'm in a position where it's sort of like it was a beer brand. I think it was them. So to your point, though, somebody can fact check me on that. But to your point, they have done a good job of marrying themselves up with sports. So I'll give that one to you.
Well, it's also interesting too. Monday after Super Bowl, our team's sitting around, for our Monday morning meeting, talking about the most memorable for them. And it's interesting. Every year we do this, and when you can't put the commercial with the product or the brand, it's mainly advertising to that specific industry. And if it's a good spot and you don't remember which beer it is or what toilet paper brand it is, it's enhancing, I think, even the competition, which is interesting in my opinion.
Well, Paul, I think there were a lot of spots that just basically branded the industry at large, which is good because a rising tide lifts all boats, right? And then there were some that were really nuanced. I think of the Salesforce spot with Matthew McConaughey at his dinner reservation couldn't be moved and he was eating in the rain and had to run across the street where there was some coverage and some protection, right? But that was very, very specific and very, very niche. It wasn't even branding Salesforce as an organization, it was branding their restaurant offering. And that to me was really fascinating because it's like a niche of a particular product line. So, very interesting to have the whole spectrum, some branding the entirety of their market and others branding something really, really specific, not even their entire offering.
I would agree with that. And looking to continue the top 10 for USA Today, top commercials, I skipped over Lay's for a minute, but the Little Farmer, Stella, we've mentioned. NFL had two spots that landed in the top 10 as well. And then we get into Bud Light, obviously things of the past with Bud Light. And this particular Big Men on Cul-de-sac, it reminded me back many, many years ago. I think it's probably 15, 20 years ago. The Real Men of Genius commercials. Do you
Mm-hmm.
remember that?
I do.
So,
Those were
so
great.
this was going back towards that type of branding and that type of humor, in my opinion, with the big men in the cul-de-sac commercial. What are your thoughts there?
It was a star-studded cast in that spot. I mean, Post Malone, Peyton Manning. I don't know how much they spent on talent, but it
Yeah.
was a lot. You got to drink a lot of six packs to pay for all those stars, I'm sure. So I thought it was interesting. I don't know that it was that memorable. Again, it doesn't seem like something they could build on. And I get AB InBev owns Budweiser and Bud Light, so I'm not trying to split hairs here. I think they knocked it out of the park branding Budweiser and running a branded Budweiser spot. I think Bud Light ran a beer commercial, and like it or hate it, they're raising the a rising tide is lifting all boats here as they're marketing just generally a light drinkable beer, but it could be Mick Ultra, it could be Stella, it could be Blue Moon, fill in the blank, right? So I don't know. For me, Big Man on Cul-de-sac, funny, not very memorable, I would say.
Yeah, that makes sense. So Uber Eats is up next, and I feel like Uber Eats has done a really good job with Matthew McConaughey. I think they started the first campaign with Jerry Rice, and comical, especially the first couple of times that you see it. And this is a continuation on that. Any thoughts there?
Look, I thought this was a great spot. I mean, it was memorable. It was built around Uber Eats. It was built around sports, really linking Uber Eats to football. I thought it was a really well done commercial. It was much better than the previous Uber Don't Eats, I think is what they were doing, where they had all these celebrities chewing on pencils and eating hairbrushes and that sort of stuff. This one to me landed a lot better. And I thought it was memorable, shareable, and it checked all the boxes.
Absolutely. So one of the ones that I thought was one of the most comical was when Sally met Hellman's. The Hellman's mayonnaise commercial, and they were edgy for sure in this commercial, and it reminded me of the campaigns that Frank's Red Hot runs. It's just we put that shit on everything, and they were definitely going out there more so than the normal Hellman's family brand that they typically had done in the past. What are your thoughts there?
I thought Hellman's did a great job here picking out a particular piece of Americana media and really reviving it. It made me think, what are some scenes in The Matrix or Terminator or other like classic movies that could be revived in quick 30-second spots where a target market, in this case, with Gen X, I would say probably, where they're able to see it and go immediately, oh, that's clever. I felt like this was a good sort of next step on Walmart's Mean Girls revival spot. There are some really creative agencies out there that are working with some brands that are willing to be a little edgy, like you said, that are able to revive these sort of classic media moments in a way that ties them to their brand. I thought Hellman's did a great job.
Absolutely. So number 10 was the Pfizer commercial knockout. And, the ones that we've talked about before now have primarily been more about either edgy, humor, nostalgia. But this one really tugged at the heartstrings. And I felt like it was a really memorable one as well.
I agree. I thought Pfizer did a great job coming out and really, I mean, look, Pfizer's been in the middle of a lot of controversy since COVID. And this isn't a discussion about that. It's a discussion about their Super Bowl spot. I thought they did a great job with their Super Bowl spot. They talked about their pledge. They showed the emotional components of pediatric cancer, and I thought they did a great job. What about you, Paul?
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's certainly something that when you talk about all the different types of emotions out there, the the memorability, if you will, was certainly there with that commercial.
I'm really surprised that the Jeep commercial with Harrison Ford didn't make the list because I saw that. I'm on LinkedIn a decent amount, and I saw a lot of accolades for that spot on LinkedIn by a lot of great marketing minds. So I was surprised not to see that one on the list. But I think this is a really robust list.
I agree. Some of the ones that were more memorable to me than some of the ones in the USA Today top 10 as well. One of them was WeatherTech. I think they did a great job with the old ladies in the car going and having a good time, and that definitely was one that was memorable to me. Another one is Pringles. You think about there was two different spots. One with Pringles with the Call of the Mustaches, and then you've got the one that I didn't think was as good with Little Caesars
With the
with Eugene
eyebrows.
Levy with the crazy eyebrows. And I felt like Pringles certainly won with Andy Reid and James Harden there. And then another one that really, they spent a lot of money for this was Angel Soft Potty Tunity, where it was almost just like a sounder of music and about toilet paper, and now it's time to go. And obviously, if you were up from the TV and using the restroom, you wouldn't have seen the rest of the commercial. But they did a good job of branding. That was one though that I was talking to our team about. I couldn't remember the name of the toilet paper brand. I couldn't remember. So that again, as we talked about earlier, it's branding the industry, not necessarily the actual the brand itself.
I think what we saw with, I believe it was Coinbase in the 2024 Super Bowl and the massive amount of media attention and social media attention that they got, this influence where people are trying to think outside the box. Hey, we don't necessarily need a 30 or 60-second spot that resonates with people where they're going to feel the emotional engagement. Yes, we've absolutely seen that with the beer brands and the car commercials and on other types of sports advertising, even within Super Bowl ads. But I think the AngelSoft team sort of looked at the Coinbase commercial in its ethos and said, "Hey, what can we do that's going to be unique and different and actually maybe shock people that they're willing to pay $7-8 million to tell people, hey, now would be a good time to go use the restroom. You have 30 seconds to do it." I thought it was creative. I thought it was unique. Probably not that shareable on social, but I will bet that marketing nerds like us, Paul, are going to be sharing screenshots of that commercial for the next couple of years.
Agreed. Another one that I felt like was a dud last year. If we go back and listen to our podcast from a year ago, I feel like Dunk Kings was one that really resonated. And this year, I think they just tried too hard. I don't know. It just wasn't there for me.
I would agree with that. It felt to me like when I watched it, I was missing something, almost like they cut the wrong parts out, or I don't know. felt a little bit choppy and almost like it was an inside joke I didn't get.
Absolutely. So the last one I wanted to talk about that was not just a dud, but just super creepy was the Seal Mountain Dew commercial. And I'm surprised that it took this long for a brand to use Seal in that way. But it's that was just odd.
I agree. I thought it was unusual. However, it seemed like it was kind of true to Mountain Dew's brand, right? They're punchy, they're weird, they're different. I mean, let's be honest, Paul, when you drink a Mountain Dew, you're not doing it for health reasons or something of that nature. You're doing it basically for brand affinity, I would say. So they had to sort of call their people, I guess, for lack of better terminology there. And again, it was a weird spot, didn't resonate with me. I'm not really a Mountain Dew drinker though, so it probably shouldn't have resonated with me.
There you go. Absolutely.
Well, Paul, this was a great time breaking down the 2025 Super Bowl 59 advertisements. Some winners, some losers, some great marketing, some questionable marketing, talking a little bit too about those ads that are raising the entire industry and building awareness of the entire market versus those that are really structured around a brand and trying to raise competitive advantage of a brand. We didn't have a lot of time to get into the discussion around none of them having a call to action. But I think that's something we can unpack in the near future here. Hey, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today on the Rethink Marketing Podcast. Until next time, keep rethinking those common assumptions and just think about all the things you could do if you had $20 million to produce, to promote, and to expand your Super Bowl commercial empire. We'll catch you next time. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If people want to connect with us, where should they go, Paul?
RethinkMarketingPodcast.com, Colin. What can listeners do to help us in return for the sage marketing wisdom and our pithy humor?
They can help us by leaving a review on their favorite platform or sharing this episode with a fellow marketer to help them cut through the clutter.
Well, until next time, keep rethinking those common assumptions.